Welcome to Weekly Wins and Losses. My name is James Hepner, former real estate entrepreneur turned self-development hacker, coach, and fulfillment strategist. Each week, we bring you a thought to wrestle with that'll help you live fully alive and gain more life. Real life is made up of both wins and losses. Both were designed for your good. That's basic reality. Without facing and learning how to embrace your losses for greater gain, you miss out. You leave 50% of your life experience on the table. So with that, let's begin the show. Happy Father's Day. Whether you are a dad, and maybe you're a soon-to-be dad, or perhaps you don't want to be a dad. I get you. I totally understand. I understand where you're coming from. Dad, and I am one. I got a 15 and a 17-year-old. It can be quite challenging. It's been very rewarding for me, but it does come with its challenges. So I can appreciate that. Now, something that I want each one of you to consider is we all have a dad, and we've all been shown lessons of how to be and perhaps how even not to be. And so perhaps that's the good news, right? Something I want to remind each one of us is no matter how severe the disaster of our life, your intrinsic value is not affected by your occupation, nor even your outward identity. It isn't, right? And your value, who is it? Well, it isn't who you are. And what you've learned, you can then choose to simply go towards that, and it'll point you directly to where you directly and absolutely want to go. So, for those of you here who are interested in having a little conversation with me and just seeing what it would look like to align with me as potentially your one-on-one coach, feel free to do so. If I'm your guide, great. If I'm not your guide, great. I just want each one of you to have the experience, to have someone in your wheelhouse that you can speak to, and somebody who can speak into your life by giving you perhaps a new perspective and letting you move forward in life. And so, for those of you who, and you'll know who you are, and those of you who are eager to get on with connecting with me, please do so. And you can simply go to www.jameshepner.com, JAMESHEPPNER.com. And on that page, you can just simply contact me and to request we have a little discovery call. And so, again, for those of you one-on-one, you know who you are. This is deep, deep experience work, and what we do is we go upriver to find out where the master switch is. So we find the thing that changes your game forever. So this is a top tier experience with me. The other people here on this call and listen to the podcast, I want to offer each and every one of you a gift, and that is to come to one of our weekly wins and losses, no charge, Friday noon calls. What we do here is people have an opportunity to share a primary win and a primary loss from the week. So we end our week strong and we reveal that all of life is gain. We don't change the facts. A loss is a loss. But unless we learn how to utilize and not eliminate losses, we're walking past 50% of our life experience. So acres of diamonds, where are they? In your experience. And so they are buried, hidden in disguise for you to discover right there. And so you can come, observe, or you could also come and share, like many people do. A primary win, primary loss. We remove the sting of what a loss feels like. We just showcase it and we say it. And again, we set ourselves up for ending the week strong, not kicking the can down the line. When you kick the can down the line, the following Monday, we want to take courageous action towards something, but then we fear that we're going to lose again, meaning that we fear we're going to lose in how we thought it was going to go, and things never end up exactly the way we thought they're going to go anyway. Whether you're a dad, whether you're going to get married, whether you have a job, whether you're an entrepreneur, how you project it's going to go, it never ends that way. It's always a little different. So there's always a bit of a loss felt in that. And so here's the thing, all of life is gain. It's not really a win or it's a loss, it's gain. So we want to bring truth to it. And so when you start the week off, after the Friday, after you come here, and you start Monday morning, and you have the idea to take courageous action forward, guess what? You're emboldened to. You will have exactly the resources from within to do so. Why? Because you cleaned the slate and you brought truth to what actually all of life is, and you get to participate with not just your wins, but your losses. So we all have preference. We tend to want to win more than lose. However, here's the thing. both are here to teach you an amazing, amazing, amazing lesson and bring you that ultimate gift. So I challenge each one of you. Come, join. Again, go to the website, www.jameshepner.com, and there you will find there's a little link, weekly wins and losses at the top. Just scroll down. It says Join Friday Call. So come, enjoy, experience the gift, experience. In the beginning of the call, we'll have a short little teaching to set you up, give you some um, modalities to step on and to utilize and to really learn the inner musculature that is required for you to onboard all of life and to utilize. And so, each one of you, whether you're one on one coaching or if you come as someone who wants to enjoy the weekly wins and losses live community call on Friday noon, each one of you is going to be hungry. And if you come and just want to today listen to the podcast, free information, that's perfectly fine. I'm happy for you, and I want to wish you all the best. So welcome to the show. Well, welcome back, my friends. Today we have on the show someone who I've had the pleasure of getting to know. David Hollenbach, and I have had a few conversations, and let me tell you, friends, he's got a story for you, and it's a precious one. Many of you will probably know this about me, and that is I, as a man, and Father's Day is right around the corner here for us. And probably when the show comes out, it'll be a little beyond Father's Day. But one of the things that I'll say is my wife has often said about me that I became a feminist before she ever did. So I'm not part of the Me Too movement. However, I think us men, we must critically assess and recognize how we treat women and also those people who have less resources than we do. And so David is one of these people who's paid for that. He has a mission and a fascinating story. He was part of almost of the military, but he was part of something as special as the military. And he'll share with you what exactly that was and where he is today and the position he was let go of and what he stood for. And so David, welcome to the show. David, welcome.
Thank you so much for having me.
Yeah,
I actually was in the military. I was in the Navy before I went into the fire service.
There you go. And speaking of fire service, thank you, David, again. I mentioned just before the show, but I'll say it again. You have such a gracious heart. You sent me 2 copies of your book, which is right behind you on the screen here. We see it to the right side, Fireproof. And you made one out to me. And then I mentioned I have a son, Harrison, and he likes to debate the tensions of life when it comes to equality, just like me. I'm not about saying, let's put the female above the man or the man above the female. The man gets his throne and the female gets her throne, the kings and queens. Ava Max has a song, Kings and Queens. Look it up, folks, if you like. I love this song. It's an amazing song. And so when I met David, I'm like, this man belongs in our family. So he sent me a book with a little note in it, and then for Harrison as well. So David, thank you for that. David, what I'd like to do a little different than normal, instead of me going off and sharing with the audience who you are, you do a much better job of it. So why don't you take like 2-3 minutes, whatever you feel is best. Describe, who are you?
Well, I would say that I am somebody that it took me a while to really nail down my purpose and really focus a lot of energy on figuring out who I am actually. And it's not the easiest question for a lot of people. I mean, I can tell you all the stuff that I've done and all that, but really what's more important is the purpose behind the things that I've done. And I think that when we explore that for ourselves, we'll get a better sense of who we are. And one of the things that we'll get into it, talking about the book and talking about my time in the fire service and really when my career ended, I had this identity crisis, and I really dug into philosophy and just really trying to explore that part of me that I was ashamed of,
Mm-hmm.
and really I wanted my experiences to refine me. And I think we spoke about this in our conversation. I wanted my experiences to refine me, not define me.
Mm-hmm.
And I've done a lot of things that I'm proud of, but like everybody else, I've done a lot of things that I'm not proud of. Um, Now, I feel like that question, who am I, is really summed up with like, I want my actions to add as much value to people in my life as possible.
Love it.
And
Love it. Thanks for the share. Can you help the audience just cue up a little bit about, so let's go take a step back even. Who are you? Tell the audience, give them some of your accolades. I know it sounds crazy and almost silly, especially when you yourself have to do it. But people want to know, who are you? Like, what kind of background do you come from? Like, I know when I first met you, this is how you show up. You're a humble soul. You get to know the backstory of all of this, and it's like, wow, that's kind of, and the whole story is kind of really interesting, right? And so, hey, would you like to just share a bit about, just real quick, and then we'll dive straight in and we'll go deeper and deeper. But give people a bit of, how did people once know you? You were known for? Go ahead.
yeah, so like I said, I'd served in the Navy. I was a gas turbine mechanic. I enlisted after a little bit of college. And when I got out of the Navy, I went back to college and went to the fire academy, went to EMT school, joined the fire department that my dad retired from. Um, Started off as a firefighter. Made some mistakes early on in my career, and I don't know that we explored this part of the story when we spoke, but I actually lost my job uh, early on in my career. I had kind of like this rebel.
Mm.
Uh, I think that I was too cocky for my own good, and it was
Mm.
easy for people above me to go, you know what, this guy needs a slice of humble pie,
Mhm.
and ultimately my termination wasn't warranted, and I got my job back, and but that slice of humble pie was served up, uh, nice big fat slice, let me tell you. Um, I um I really wanted to make my return to the fire department meaningful, and I worked my butt off, and I wanted to make sure that my father's legacy,
Mm.
me, was a good one.
Mm.
So I trained, I studied, I went back to school, I promoted, I worked my way up from firefighter to engineer, which is like the driver, pump operator guy. Then promoted to lieutenant, which is responsible for a fire station. Typically rides in the passenger front seat of the fire truck. From there, I promoted to battalion chief. As battalion chief, I served as the chief of special operations. And then after 3 years in special operations, I moved into operations and was the battalion chief of a battalion that consisted of 6 fire stations, 2 of them being special operations stations. Um, I became certified as a critical incident stress management peer counselor. Um, I was a public safety rescue diver. When I was the chief of special operations, I was charged with rebuilding the dive team. It had been dismantled in like 2004, I believe. And, I'm in Central Florida. There's so much water, and it didn't seem to make a whole lot of sense, but we ended up with a fire chief that made the investment to rebuild the dive team, and at the time I was the chief of special operations, and it fell on me to rebuild that. And uh, I've got a great story about uh, the results. You know, just a moving story about a young man that we saved shortly after the dive team was operational. Um, and then as a lieutenant, when I first became a lieutenant, I felt uh, like I was lacking in the leadership ability arena. I had, let's see, at my fire station, my first fire station as a lieutenant, there was an Army Ranger, a that had served over in Iraq, and several other military veterans. One of them, I believe, is still in the reserves, is like a major in the Air Force. Uh, I had a very senior firefighter, had probably twice as much time on the job as me. My engineer had spent her entire career in special operations. Man, there was just a wealth of knowledge and
Wow.
experience on my crew. And here I
Wow.
am coming in to an established team, and I got to figure out how I fit into that whole matrix. And I wasn't prepared. I didn't feel like I was what they needed. And I set to work to become what they needed. And that was, I guess, the beginning of my leadership journey. I started developing a program to first help me become a leader, but as new firefighters came in and joined my crew, I wanted to develop them as leaders as well. So that's when the leadership program started coming to life. I ended up, over the course of several years, it ended up turning into the leadership development program for the fourth largest fire department in the state of Florida. And it went from entry level firefighters all the way up to chief officers. And
David, who did you feel like you needed to become? So let's just backtrack a little bit. Who did you feel like when observing the people that you're serving side by side with? Who did you feel like you needed to become? Because sometimes we hear these narrations in our brain, we're not enough, not enough. Yet what's interesting about this piece of our conversation, we're all picking up on you're choosing to do something about it. Often when we feel like we're not enough, it can be anxious striving. However, when I look at your accomplishments, like you say, the training program ended up being the one that was one of the largest in Florida, right? And so my guess is you focus less on the fact that you weren't enough, but leaned perhaps more so into just diving into what was actually required to be a good leader, right? So who did you think you needed to become?
well, I first, that journey of personal development really was about how do I add value to the people that I'm leading when they have so much more experience than me. And really, it's, I had to know them. So I first had to develop my communication skills and build rapport with them, gain their trust by being who I said I was, being honest about my shortcomings because they knew what they were. There was no hiding the fact that they had more experience than me. So a lot of times when I didn't have an answer for something, I would defer. And if time was of the essence and I needed to make a decision right away, I would make that decision. And if it didn't work out, I owned that. And I would make sure that I told everybody, like, hey, this is what I did. This is why I decided to do this. It didn't work out the way I thought it would. And I think that this is why. So in the future, I will do it this way. And I think it'll work out a lot better. That approach really helped me develop the trust that I needed to have. Um, for these men and women to trust me with their lives, that they trusted that I was making decisions, and when I was making them, I was accounting for their well-being. um, they definitely needed to know that I cared about them, and so that was really the purpose of all the training, all the education that I acquired, was to make sure that I was somebody that could add value to the people that I was leading.
Love that part. Interesting. Earlier, you're talking about, a generous slab of humble pie that I don't know if you were force fed, but they served it. You took a bite. It was perhaps unwarranted at the end of the day. They let you have your job back. However, something that, gosh, when I think, and I can relate to your story. What does it look like when we got leadership on our brain, leadership on our heart? What does it look like when we want to lead ourselves well? Like before we ever influence anyone, we must learn how to influence ourselves best, right? And I can't think of any other way to lead oneself best than through the lens of empathy, right? And so
Yeah.
we have to be able to relate to our experience. And it's something that you just languaged, and I'm paraphrasing. And if I get it wrong, please do correct me. I'm willing to be wrong anywhere. But it seems to me like when we own both our strengths and our weaknesses, that's leadership done well, that people can honor, respect, and it just fuels the trust mechanism. And I love that. It's just, oh man, that is just such a neat little story. So here's where it gets interesting, folks. Here's a gentleman that served, had plenty of acknowledgments all around him. People promoted him. He went from here to there, from there to the next level, kept climbing the ladder, right? You guys have ladders in your industry, kept climbing the ladder, going higher and higher, higher and higher. And all of a sudden, um, that top rung presented an interesting situation. Enlighten our people here. What happened?
So early in, well, first, let me preface all this with, during my career, I witnessed some horrific things, and responded to situations that will stay with me for the rest of my life. And I knew when I became a firefighter that I was going to be exposed to certain things. However, at that young of an age, I did not even consider the effects that it might have on me later on in life. And the culture in the fire service, especially when I joined,
Mm,
is one in which you were expected to be tough, and that the stuff that you were going to see should not be, it should not affect you in a negative way. You experience it and you put it away. Don't bring that stuff home with you. Blah.
compartmentalize it, close
Yeah.
it off. Mhm.
But the reality is that throughout a career, the things that public safety professionals experience,
Mm.
some are better than others. But I mean, I can tell you, since I've retired, there's been multiple suicides from just people that I know that I'd worked with throughout the years. PTSD is a real thing, and I struggled with it. And in 2019, there were multiple calls. Well, there was 3 calls specifically that were the most horrific of my career. And at around the time of that 3rd call of the year, it was around in June, I became aware of some poor behavior, and that's putting it lightly, um, towards women. In this situation, when it first came to my attention, it was specifically one woman and a fairly new firefighter. I approached her with the information that I had overheard, and she was like, "No, I don't know what you're talking about." And through basically telling her, "Listen, you know, if you confide in me, it's going to be up to you whether or not your name comes out. If you decide to file a complaint, that's up to you. But I would like to know who's responsible." And she was like, "Oh, this is nothing. Way worse has happened to me since I got on this job." And I'm like, "What?" And and every woman that I've talked to about this, when I vocalize this initial surprise, the women are not surprised at all to hear this. Um, so it's almost like women are socialized to accept the fact that women are going to, or men are going to behave poorly. And I just hate that. And it made me sick to think that it was occurring in my department. I ended up going to my supervisor, gave him the information that I had, and he was like, "Well, if they're not willing to file a complaint, then, we've got nothing." And I'm like, "Well, we have this information. We've got to do something with it."
Mm.
And he's like, "Well, what are we going to do? Because, if we can't have an actual victim, there is no crime, right?" And I'm like, "I don't know. I think that there's something that can be done. Clearly, the environment is not one in which women feel safe coming forward. And if they're going to be treated worse for coming forward about being treated a certain way that no woman should have to endure, like, why would anybody come forward? And then why would anybody say, 'Hey, why don't you come join the fire department with me and get treated like crap? Get treated like an object?'" I mean, we're talking like sexually charged letters, anonymous letters placed under their pillow, in their locker, in their boot, um, comments, actual physical sexual assault, essentially, is how I would view it. Um, so these things were happening, and I looked further into it. So, I'll talk to some other women, see if anybody else will, be willing to file a complaint. Every woman that I spoke to either had experienced it themselves, had witnessed it, or had at least had a conversation with a woman on the job that had experienced it or something worse. So, not one of them was willing to come forward and file a complaint. Every single one of them used a phrase similar to this: "I'm not going to be that girl." It blew my mind. It was extremely frustrating, but after taking a step back and going, like, what am I asking of them? They're coming into this department working really hard to become one of the team. And now I'm asking them to isolate themselves and basically say, I can't be a part of the team because I'm different than you. And so that's a big ask. Now, there's more to the story. There's some things in my private life that led to a malicious accusation that got me arrested. Thankfully, I have security cameras, and I had the security footage that uh, proved that I was not a domestic violence kind of person. Um, but nonetheless, I was arrested for domestic violence, which then put me all over the news. And here I am, a very well respected chief officer with a teenage daughter. Um, and the woman that I thought that I had ended a relationship with, you know, is behaving as though I was unfaithful to her and that I was physically abusive to her. Um, one time, apparently. And the story is ridiculous. Anyways, that fell on the heels of this other investigation that was going on. And I had brought the information to my supervisor regarding the poor behavior towards women in the department. He had moved it up the chain of command to the chief of operations, who moved it up to the fire chief. Meetings were scheduled and canceled and rescheduled and canceled and rescheduled and canceled. They, I don't believe that they really wanted to hear what I had to say. So if they don't listen to me, then it's not real. And then after my arrest, when all this came out, they made it seem as though I had brought that information forward in an attempt to get myself out of trouble, even though all I needed to do was provide the security camera footage at my house, and I was never charged with anything.
So for them it was a convenient sequential thing. How do we make this go away? Well, wait a minute, we got something serendipitously, it just happened. How about we do this, right? We connect him. This is the backstory to why he's doing this. And so perhaps we can get it all just to disappear so that we can let the abuse continue. It's not a joke, but go ahead.
Yeah. And now there, I have to say that there were some mistakes that I made along the way. After I had ended the relationship with the woman that refused to move out of my house, uh, I ended up engaging in another physical relationship with a female firefighter. Just happened to be a female firefighter that was much younger than me. And looking back on it, I mean, like, I should have had the wherewithal to say this isn't a good idea, but I didn't. I have to admit, like, it felt really good to be desired by a younger woman. And I violated the boundaries that I should have had in place as a chief officer, as somebody that was mentoring, that was trying to advocate for women. Here I am engaging in a relationship with a young woman. And
Was she consenting?
oh yeah, yeah. I mean, it was a before all the drama, it was a great relationship. She was just an incredible woman, an incredible firefighter, extremely smart, um, and I believe is going to be very, very successful in whatever she chooses to do. The relationship with me and everything that came with it was more than she bargained for, I think, and that's you know. Very another thing that I just hate that happened, that came out of all this. And so one of the things that I talk about in my book, it's at the end of the book where I talk about how important it is that men step up and advocate for women, mentor women, especially in male dominated organizations. But one thing that you have to do when you're mentoring people is that you've got to establish very clear boundaries and maintain them. And I don't mean just for the women, like, oh, if I'm going to mentor a woman, I got to have clear boundaries with her. No, men and women that are being mentored, the mentor needs to establish boundaries
Mm,
regardless of gender.
mm.
Um,
Yeah, I would agree, because what ends up happening is somebody comes to the table and they're seeking mentorship. And so it's a little easier for the mentee to not become aware that something unhealthy is transpiring, unhealthy perhaps for them long term, right? And so the mentor typically has, the strong arm within the situation. The mentee is like, well, this must be okay, right? Go ahead.
you froze up, so I don't know what you actually said.
Oh, I'm so sorry. Okay, I'll say it again. So perhaps it'll be better this time, be shorter. Hmm. The mentee often is very trusting of the mentor, because that's why the mentee comes. The mentee comes, I like to see what you mentor have to offer. And so the mentor has a bit more of weight, a little more of a strong arm approach, not like intending to, but that's just what ends up being. So oftentimes power dynamics, when you think about in relation to the structure of mentee mentor, it's just a natural occurrence, right? So I love how you are fighting your way towards the personal responsibility that you bear as the mentor. Beautiful. Go ahead. Mhm.
So the whole situation was, it just seemed like a lot of seemingly innocuous
Mm.
decisions that, most people in that circumstance would probably do the same thing. I think most single men in their 40s would be flattered by a young, attractive woman, coming onto them. And so, however, you've got to be an adult, you've got to be professional,
Mhm.
and, just say, yeah, okay. I don't even know, like, I feel like if I had to relive those moments again, I just probably wouldn't even put myself in the situation where that would be a topic of discussion, you know?
Mhm. How did you go from that to where you currently are? So you're currently at your fiance's house. So obviously you've done some inner reflection, right? And it's like, well, this is what life is for all of us, right? And so how did you, and again, I don't want to speed up your story. I want to hear the rest of it. And I think everyone here wants to hear. This is fascinating. Go ahead. Mhm.
Well, now I was arrested. I was put on administrative leave while they investigated the situation. And I believe the media fallout was one in which the department wasn't prepared to, respond to. And
Just
they
one
terminated.
second. Just one second. Let's just pause there. Let's back it up. I think there's a little piece in here. The audience might be wondering, investigation. So your first woman, the one that was living with you, the one that falsely accused, luckily you had the video security footage, which revealed that there was no domestic violence and abuse. So the charges against you were dropped. True?
Well, there was no charges filed at all.
Okay, no charges filed. But then how does this other person come into the picture that confused the matter, right? I think there's that piece.
So the whole domestic issue came about because a love letter written to me was found by the woman that refused to move out of my house.
Which was your
And
ex, which is your ex, who
correct.
you thought the relationship was over. She found a love letter that the current one that you were with, you'd already told this one in your house, it's over, it's over. She refused to move out. Then she finds a love letter from the girl who you're currently having a relationship with from the force.
Right.
Mhm,
So that is what set her off
mm, mhm,
and led to my arrest. And the day after my arrest, the ex went to my department and told them that I was having an affair with a young firefighter, gave them her name, and the investigation began.
because there's
And
a code, right? There's a code. You're not supposed to apparently, right, have a relationship. Or you can, but you have to report it.
right, so the policy was put in place, and it basically says, uh, you know, if you if you have a relationship, or if a relationship moves beyond platonic, the higher ranking person has a responsibility to
Mm,
report the relationship within 7 days of it moving beyond platonic. Now, I was in a situation that was not ideal, and the young woman that I had began to date, she was in a similar situation. Neither one of us wanted our relationship to be public or have anybody made aware of it. And she was in a different battalion. She was not in my chain of command. There was really, uh, in our minds at that time, nobody else's business. And by policy, I had a responsibility to
mm,
report it regardless, and I didn't.
mhm,
Um, and that is when the investigation began into where I failed as a battalion chief, where you know, my integrity was brought into question, and then they brought in to the whole equation me reporting the sexual harassment, the misconduct by other men that was brought in, and they were like, well, how are we to believe this? And I'm, who are the women? And I was like, well, I gave them my word that I would not provide anybody their names. It's up to them whether or not they want to come forward. And they were like, well, we're giving you a direct order.
mm, mhm,
We want their names.
mm.
And I told them no. And I was terminated. My employment was terminated, and that is when that identity crisis came about. I had spent 23 years in the fire service. I had built a pretty good reputation, and
Thinking you gave them what they wanted, thinking you took the courses, you did the time, even though it wasn't the amount of time that some seniors had, they're working with you. However, doing and giving of your life, and of course, sometimes the coincidence of life, the randomness. Here you were as a man becoming aware there's certain things happening, and it just so happened that, there's a few things going on, but one of the things that you became disturbed at is that there was this undertow of male dominant hierarchy, and women were, of course, the ones that were, taking much of the blow and not wanting to stand up, wanting to, but not quite sure how, perhaps. I mean, society, who likes to be oppressed? It's like you've said earlier when you and I have talked, right? They're just trying to fit into a man's world. That's kind of what they're doing. It's what they say oftentimes, and um, it's interesting because the female, though similar to male, a little different. Um, and back to the point on how we started this, a man must critically assess his role in relation to women and others a fewer resources. And so firstly, let me say it this way: I just honor, firstly, for your time in the in service, but how you chose to spot something and say, actually, this is not the thing for a man to walk past. You know, it's one thing to open up the door when we walk into a restaurant, or the car door of our lover or partner. It's one thing. It's another thing to observe oppression and turn a blind eye. And so I think leadership requires that we must be about the work. And then you bring in this very interesting dynamic, this the stance of, and I'm human too. Human, not because I wrote these letters to these people or did I engage in that type of behavior, but I violated policy. It's true, I did. I violated policy and I own it. I should have maybe reported, none of their business perhaps, but I signed an agreement and I didn't let them know that I was having a relationship beyond, platonymous, and a consenting adult, mind you, though. At the same time, in token, here I am making case for women, and apparently, and conveniently so, and it's like serendipitously, the randomness of, and there's no coincidence, all of a sudden, you find yourself in the position of you're fired, you're terminated. And so talk to us about those first few realizations. Standing up for a cause, and then being like, and actually, I could have done different, but having to reckon with the full humanity that you were. You're not a man of perfection. Still believing in your cause, not needing somebody to be bad so you can be good. Like, that's one thing I really respect about you. You don't ever speak about how others are bad so that you can be the good one. And that takes a lot of leadership work. That takes a lot of courageous personal attitude, checking in with, being honest, not just accolades. It's like, actually, the good news is that I am both strong and I know my weaknesses. And here, I'm going to reveal to you, here are my weaknesses, right? So how did you, in those entry moments, or I shouldn't maybe say it this way, how did you not make someone bad so you could feel good? Perhaps you did exactly that. You made somebody look bad or feel bad, or you chose to see them as bad so you could just get your bearings about you. I don't know. Share with us. I don't want to prime the pump here. Share with us. Go ahead.
No, I would say that that's very accurate. I was angry at a lot of different people. Um, First and foremost, the men that behaved poorly towards the women on the department. It made me ashamed. Um, one that for 23 years I'd been in the department. I knew some bad stuff had happened, but I thought in my mind, no, we've moved past that misogynistic behavior. We're a much more advanced department. We're very progressive, but clearly not. And to know that I was in a position of authority and leadership and hadn't been aware of such behavior, and now I'm in a position where, like, I need to do something, but I don't even know what to do. And I couldn't convince any women to actually report the treatment that they had endured. Um, I couldn't provide them a feeling of safety. They were, if they came forward, they would be outed and excluded from the group. They were no longer going to be a part of the group. They were going to be that girl, right? And so I was angry at the fire chief. I was angry at the chief of operations. I had not been given the opportunity to provide the information that I had until I was under investigation, and I was interrogated by the investigative body of the department. And, they asked me who the women were that I interviewed, and I told them I wasn't going to give them their names. And this is why.
And how many
Uh,
women, by the way, came forward? Like, when you said safe place here with me, I'm not gonna forward any of your contact. How many women?
so the women that I spoke to in person it was probably around 12 or 13. It was 2019 when all this happened, but overall, I mean, it was probably 20, 20 plus women that I spoke to either in person or on the phone.
that
And
that cited things that happened to them.
yes, yeah.
And of those 20, have any of them come forward, or has there been any progression on that?
No. So what ended up happening was every single woman that was employed by the department was called in and given a direct order to answer all the questions, and they were asked if anything had happened to them. And I mean, I had already told them that not one single woman is going to say that anything has happened to them.
Hmm.
Um,
Fearing,
Now,
not fearing the consequence of being that girl,
right,
whistleblower, right?
right.
Hmm.
One woman actually did come forward, and it was not one that I spoke to.
Hmm.
She ended up saying, "Yes, I've been sexually assaulted at the fire station when the engine crew was out. I was on the rescue with this individual, and I was in bed, and this is what happened." He was terminated. He was represented by the union. She did not have any representation or support because
Wow. Wow.
she wasn't, she wasn't accused of doing anything, but everybody knew who she was, and she started getting treated poorly. Um, Her crew at that station ended up talking negatively about her to the investigators. And ultimately they said, well, she had engaged in these behaviors. And here in that environment, either you go along or you're not part of the group. So of course, when you're trying to be a part of, like, a bunch of immature men, joking around and playing games, whatever, I don't know. I guess there had been sexually charged jokes or whatever. I don't really recall what
Hmm.
the accusations towards her were, but they were like, okay, well, she made them believe that this kind of behavior was okay. So he ended up getting his job back, like
Wow.
within 3 months. So he got reemployed by the department.
And what happened to
This
her?
She ended up going to a station that is out away from
They
the
transferred
busy.
her, right? They transferred her.
Yeah, I think they gave her the option, and of course she took it. So
Isn't this a fascinating play? Not humorous at all. Like, I'm listening to an audiobook. These two women in Iran were thrown into prison for their faith, and so these women ended up being Christian, and so there it's not allowed to be baptized as a believer, right? And so these women were thrown into prison, and it's fascinating. I'm listening to this book, and it's, oh my goodness, the men, what they can get away with there. Like, get this, you can marry someone for an hour so that you don't go against your faith. Marry someone for an hour so you can have sexual relation with them. And when there's rape, guess who goes to jail? Not the man. The
yeah.
woman goes to jail.
Well, yeah,
And so,
because she was so irresistible
right? And
and
so you
tempted the
think about it,
man.
it's so fascinating. We think so often the Americas, us Westerners, right? We're like, well, we're so glad we're farther ahead than that. You just revealed, and this is the undertow. There's much of this still going on. It's like, I hate to say it, but oftentimes we realize that what we've built on is we just got really good at hiding the facts. Like you said earlier, let's just not talk about it. And then apparently it didn't happen.
Yeah.
And it's like, actually, the voices, the cry of the oppressed. It's like, well, wait a minute. Whoa, 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 whoa. Why are we so ashamed that we get to be real about it? It's like what you're doing. And again, you're no angel, and neither am I. We have weaknesses. And why is that not the good news that we can share with people? We got some work to do. Why is it that we're like, well, no, we want to be the super organization? As a matter of fact, strength doesn't come. Think about Enron. Strength doesn't come from just saying we're better than we are. Enron cooked the books. Bunch of Harvard grads, Yale, doesn't matter. Stanford, these individuals were like, the numbers don't reveal who we actually are, because who we are is better than the numbers. So why don't we just do a little editing? And guess what happens, right? The editing just comes back to haunt you, and it created quite the catastrophe, right? And realism is moving away from fantasy, and it's to embrace reality and see clearly what's in front of us, and then to do something about it. Talk to us a little bit about when you observe this whole scenario, pulling back from the lens of being right in it in that moment. So we're going to move now from the anger towards some of your superiors, some of what happened. This guy, one of the guys gets his job back. Pulling back, and you're seeing this from a bird's eye view, right? What do you think society is actually ready for now? Because clearly what you came to bring was a little much. Meaning you thought people are ready to speak, and it's like, well, actually, I'm not sure. I don't know if I'm saying that right again or proper when I say a little much, but you came to bring, like, let's bring this to the surface, because the good news is when we get to work on the things that create crumbling, what do you think society's ready for? Like, now that you take and you see it all from a different lens, from where you're sitting today.
Well,
Mm-hmm.
what's interesting is, like, none of this is a surprise to women. When I have this conversation, they're like, yeah, and
Mm-hmm.
like,
Mm.
deal with it every single day, and
Unfortunately.
yeah. And I think this is where men need to step up. The definition of man and being a man should be redefines it as it. And if these manly men are actually living up to that ideal, um, there's something missing, and that is the need to be civil, mature, and
Mm.
when they see women being treated less than, step up and advocate for them. Especially in male-dominated organizations where a minority group
Mm-hmm.
is pushing against them to step out of the flow, or go against the flow. That's a big ask when their support system is not as extensive as the men who have created the environment.
Yeah, it's like the medical community. Often we wonder, for example, vaccine mandates. So how is this that apparently there's still in Canada, we still have vaccine mandates, and how is this, right? And when you look at it, well, it's like the government's hands, to some degree, they made choice. Some people would say their hands are tied. And so what's fascinating in the Charter of Rights and Freedoms, there's actually nothing listed for medical freedoms. We in essence, we don't, there's nothing there written. So here's the thing. What do you think an institutional structure would do when it comes into something like a crisis, like COVID? They're going to defer to the medical literature or the scientific community. And the scientific community is the one that supports vaccines or the mandates of. And so it gets all a little convoluted. It's like a conflict of interest, right? I got a question for you. How dare, think about this, right? How dare we fight for equality? How dare we as people fight against objectification? Like, let's be honest. Think about where the male species is like, so even back to Iran, that question, how dare we fight against objectifying, the woman's parts, her individual. I like her because I like her parts. Who is a woman? Is a woman parts? No, a woman is beyond parts. She's beyond an object. She's a human being, my friend, which we know. And when we think about it, it's like game's up, we say, because we think society's ready for saying game's up. Let's not objectify. That's not a manly thing to do. Let's not do this. And all of a sudden they say, how dare you fight it? Don't ruin our game. Listen. Apparently they're okay with it. There. Who's there? Yeah, apparently they're just parts. It's them over there. They're just this little group. The group that we love and we can't help but act like idiots around. Go beyond what we know is reasonable. Poke at them. We can see they're uncomfortable, then they play along with us, and then we apparently get all upset when they refuse our advances. It's like when we think about equality. So like I talked to you when you and I first connected, Harrison and I have this deep interest, and it's been on my heart for years. When I met Meg, she wasn't necessarily always treated that well in her home. Her parents, for example, her parents are great people, but it's just a different time, different space, different tradition, whatever it ended up being. And so lesser than, she's female, lesser than. And I'm thinking to myself, my friend, people, if you knew who I am today, large in part, is because of who I have, the little precious, my mini Meg. I call her my mini Megalicious, not object, but she's the one that helped my soul come alive. And when I think about equality, I think to myself, at the end of the day, how do we think that we as men bring about the change that we desire most unless we properly stress test the relation we have within how we choose to show up in the world? We would have to have a lot of disrespect for ourselves to treat another person like an object. If you don't respect yourself, you're not going to feel like a leader. And guess what's going to happen when you don't feel like a respectable leader from within? When it's your time to shine, when duty calls, you're going to hesitate and not know what the fuck to do. Why? Because you never saw it clearly to begin with, because you ended up being an idiot with how you treated yourself. That's how you treat other people. Equality. Harrison and I are about, listen, Harrison talks about misogyny. And it's like you say, and he's like, oh, and he gets a little bit in the weeds because he's like, hey, listen, the Me Too movement. He's like, listen, and he's always about bringing to the surface, yeah, but us men, we don't need to make us bad so they can be good. But he's fighting for this. He's wrestling the concept. And I love that about your book, Fireproof. The wrestle, the inner tension of being like, listen, how can we as society, when we see that we need to clearly right the ship on something that is not just non-proper, it's not right. How do we do if it's not right? And perhaps it's the pendulum has swung too far to the left. I'm not talking about left or right in political, like forget this crap. Okay. But if we've gone too far to this way, too far to the left, oftentimes what we do is as humanity is we go, oh, we got to swing hard to the right. We go way over here. And Harrison, I and you, we're fighting for bringing the pendulum, the Tao Te Ching. I'm an amateur on spiritual readings, the Bible and Tao Te Ching, but it talks about the way. What's the way? Bible talks about the way too. What's the way? The way is right in the middle, being a bridge builder. Looking at it going, hey, listen, I know we've gone too far. So we're going to fight for here. And you stood up and you, as a man, came along and said, hey, listen, is there a problem? Not under my leadership. And the institutional structure, which, by the way, everyone's poking at today, which is the good news. If we poke at it, not as in to take it down, like I don't hear listeners here, I don't think anybody's hearing that you're desiring to destroy the structure. What you're doing is you're poking at it to make it better. That was your intent. And they came along and they said, how dare you, how dare you, how dare you?
Now, it's very telling. I don't know that I've told this part of the story, but it could just be nothing, but I think there's something to it.
Please.
I wrote an article when I was a lieutenant, It was when I was working on my bachelor's degree, and actually, it was when I was working on my master's degree. I had really dug into ethics, philosophy, leadership development, emotional intelligence, and I ended up writing an article for Fire Engineering magazine, arguably one of the largest magazines,
Mm-hmm.
for the fire service. And in this article, I talk about
Mm-hmm.
the culture in the fire service.
Mm-hmm.
And when you look at leadership, and I just kind of happened on this, where when you are developing leaders, first you want to develop their communication skills. You want them to focus on valuing the people that they're leading, actually caring about them, being empathetic, understanding who they are as a person, and working really hard at developing them so that they can, experience success. And
Valuing them, not hoarding power over them, right?
right,
Totally. Mm-hmm.
right. And now when you dig into emotional intelligence and, well, the research surrounding leadership, you would say, okay, these individuals that are highly valued as leaders, like everybody would go, oh yeah, they are one of the greatest leaders of all times. If you look at their qualities, what they exhibit, you'll see that they have a very high level of emotional intelligence.
Mm-hmm.
Now, some of those components of emotional intelligence that seem to be lacking in a lot of male dominated organizations, and the ones that you really focus on developing within the ranks, is better communication, focusing on the people that you're leading. So you focus on people skills, those soft skills, communication, self-awareness. How am I being received? Am I relating to them? Building relationships, trusting relationships, right? These are all components of emotional intelligence that women score higher than men in when evaluated, right? Now, granted, I'm sure that there are men that score high and women that score low, but by and large, women tend to score higher than men in these areas of emotional intelligence. And when you look at male dominated organizations and those components of emotional intelligence that are typically lacking, it's, the ones that are credited to women being, kind of natural skills, right? So
Surprise.
I wrote this article. It was not received well. But when I wrote it, I was a lieutenant. And at the time, the chief of the department, well, actually, at the time, he was the acting chief. And there was a search going on, a national search for a new fire chief. He was the interim fire chief, or acting fire chief. And policy stated that if I was going to submit an article to a publication, I had to get approval by the fire chief. He had to sign off on it. Well, I submitted it to him through the proper chain of command, and kept on coming back to me like, no, you got to change this. No, you got to change that, blah, blah, blah.
Until the story, nothing left of it, probably.
Well, ultimately, what he said was, yeah, you can submit it, but you need to take out any connection to this department. You are not going to present yourself as an officer within this department related to Orange County, Florida, none of that. So that was the directive that I got. And I'm like, whatever. So I submitted it. Fire Engineering grabbed the article.
So whatever, as in you edited it the way they like or not?
Yeah, no, I did.
So you complied.
I complied because there was still enough meat to it.
Sure.
Right. But it was it was kind of a blow to be told, like, no, you're not going to represent this department. Well, then we ended up with a real leader as a fire chief, and I ended up asking him, or actually, I relayed that information to him. I said, "Yeah, I'm being published in this," and he was like, "And they told you not to put any connection to the department?" He was like, "No, no, no, no. You need to make sure that they know that you are an officer with Orange County Fire Rescue in Orlando, Florida. Make sure it's very clear. If you can give them our patch, make sure they know that it's us."
Mm-hmm.
And so I did.
Mm-hmm.
And then the article was published, and it just really, it wasn't viewed as a positive thing.
Mm-hmm.
Well, years later, and that acting fire chief is now the chief of the department. He was the one responsible for terminating my employment, canceling meetings, all that stuff. So I feel like, this is just my personal opinion. I feel like for the leadership, or for the fire service
Mm-hmm.
to really make a meaningful change in the culture, it's going to take strong leadership. Um, you know, men and women working together to move the needle in changing the culture. Um, Men that are not willing to stand up and say that things need to change probably need to move on. Uh, so,
Yeah, no, it's an interesting tale, right? And when I say tale, I mean it's just like a real life story, right? So, a few things that I want to go through with you. Number one, when I think about facing reality, it can be difficult, but here's the thing. It's a lot better if we face it now. Like, which child doesn't know that? Let's tell the truth now because it'll just get worse. Like, think about if somebody interrogates you, like you've committed a crime, you lie now and you reveal later. Well, it's nice you revealed, but you could have also done it earlier, and the consequence would probably have been a little different, maybe a little
right,
less harsh, right? And so, what's really interesting to me is how we seem to all want to see clearly, but it's interesting how we almost purposefully put ourselves in a position where we can't see clearly. And what that looks like is avoiding just looking at what's really there. Like black and white and the gray reveal here are the facts. And why is evidence bad news? I think about cancel culture. It seems like, and it might be getting this wrong, but like you said, your station said we don't want to be associated with this at all. Like, make sure you remove all association to us in this article completely. Well, chances are they're just connecting with what they know is a real possibility, and more than likely a probability, if not a inevitability, and that is if you're going to stand out, it's going to come back to them, and they don't want to be canceled out. Here's the thing, right? Not wanting to be canceled out. I think there's a strong linkage to choosing to be resistant to the truth. And when we're resistant to the truth, we don't see clearly, which means you'll never see it as it is. And if you don't see it as it is, like think about even in the markets today, who isn't just a little stressed, right? The markets, people are like, I can't believe it. Really? Where did this come from? I can't believe it. And so the ultimate reality is reality will reveal to us at some point in time what's actually there. If this whole structure is built on toothpicks and it's about to crumble, listen, it's going to come to the surface sooner or later. Now, we get to kick the can down the line. Father's Day, speaking of fathers, what does a father do? Is the gift to our children to kick the can down the line? Or is it to own up and be like, well, this is the good news. We get to do something about this now. Why do we fear being someone that literally accepts two sides of the coin. If you look at a coin, and I challenge any listeners to do this, grab a coin and just feel it. You're going to feel the texture on one side from the thumb, maybe, and the texture from the other side. Now, I dare you to say that the coin is only real if I see one side. So slap it on the table and be like, no, what I just felt isn't true. All it is that side that I see. What kind of nonsense is going on up here? Now, I'm trying to empathize with what is. The only thing that I can deduct, and I'm not a reductionist by nature, nor do I think that's very energetic for me, but let's be honest. If we want to see clearly, we have to pick up the coin and we have to be able to like taste and see that the coin is a coin. It has side one, side two, heads, tails. Not good or bad. It's a coin. Facts are facts. And unless we see both sides of the coin, we're never seeing clearly. And so I can appreciate people having fear of being canceled out. However, when does a man realize a man? What I just mean to say is, when does the human spirit, which by the way, which you and I both know, the female, somebody who has, for example, the genetic organs of a female, can also have masculinity surging through her veins. Truthfully, that's what she has as well. I have feminine energy in me surging through my veins at the exact same time as masculine. I primarily show up in masculine, but I'll tell you something. Anything that's nurturing, anything where I can have deeper empathy than a typical the way a typical man would show up, it's when I activate my feminine side. Anytime I go beyond thinking I got to solve something, I go to the feminine side. Anytime I go, I don't have to fix, manage, or control it, that's going to the feminine side. It doesn't make me less of a homie, whatever that means. My sense is homie, right? But what do you think? You have a daughter. How share with the audience, how old is your daughter? And talk to us just for a minute about what is your relationship like with your daughter? I know with your dad, it was quite strained for a while when everything was coming in the media. Your dad virtually disowned you for a bit. Now he's kind of come around, I think, substantially. But talk specifically to the dads listening to the show, or even the moms listening, who are perhaps going to flip this to their husbands. Like, what does it mean to be a dad, to wrestle with tensions that just seem, to be honest, it doesn't seem fair, right? However, you've gone beyond fair. Look at what you got behind you on the left side, from embers to excellence. What you're saying is, listen, from this to ashes. You know what? Excellence. Talk to the dads. Talk to us about what it looks like to own your humanity and to do it well and not fear the truth, but run towards it. What do you get to see because of this?
Well, I'd like to frame this in the world of the fire service. I had overheard my daughter speak very highly of me, bragging about the things that I was doing. Mm-hmm. I received, I've received accolades and stuff. And, my daughter would come to award ceremonies and things and watch me receive stuff. And it's really cool. But to hear her talk to her friends about me, like brag about me, like was just like, man. Mm-hmm. But then I'm like, fuck, what if she wants to go into the fire service?
Wow.
I don't want her to ever experience what some of those women have had to experience. Like, in a selfish sense, I don't want to go to prison, like I would murder somebody if they treated my daughter like that. Mm-hmm. And so my relationship with my daughter is one in which I want her to be very independent. I work with her as I see mistakes that I've made in the past. I share them with her. I'm very open with her. And
good job, by the way.
I talk about leadership with her.
Transparency, right?
Yeah. Well,
authenticity.
when when I look at the fire service, it's just a small segment of our world. You know, women deal with this day in and day out, where just out in public, a lot of times, if there's a man and a woman and something needs to be like something needs to happen, it's deferred to the man. The man will make this happen. You know, I've seen it on fire scenes when the person in charge is a woman, but there's a man nearby, and citizens go to the man, even though the woman is clearly the one in charge. And when a
Society,
mistake,
yeah, society tends to defer to the male, the one with the male organs, say it like this, the one who identifies as the male, even though clearly what you're saying, ranking officers are clearly in that position because they're more qualified for the job.
many times, well, anywhere in the world, many times there are women that are better equipped to take on a challenge than a man.
Mm-hmm.
And I feel like,
Which, by the way, I'm going to pause you for half a second. I find it hilarious. Apparently, a masculine presence, somebody who identifies as a male, would consider it a good thing to be threatened by anything. Why not engage with everything? Why allow something, someone, whatever is happening? Why let anything? Think about a lion. There's a lion going out into the jungle. He critically assesses his strengths and his weaknesses. He knows what to do and what not to do, and he doesn't know what to do and not to do because he has done this work properly. So what I find is just, and sorry for just interjecting here, and please continue, but I find it fascinating how insecure a man would need to be. Honestly, it's kind of cute. How insecure are we as men when we show up and we feel like, well, if we allowed her to shine because she has the ability, maybe there won't be room for us to perform this to the finish line? Like, it's beyond. It's beyond. But keep going. Sorry.
I feel like, well, this is another thing that I've witnessed before, where you can have a man and a woman, firefighters. They're both working at accomplishing similar tasks. Both of them fail. The man gets coaching, mentoring here. Next time you'll be able to do it better. And then, see that? That's why women don't belong in the fire service.
Why?
That's the mindset. Like,
Wow.
Clearly they don't belong because she can't even do it.
Yeah.
Doesn't matter that all it takes is somebody to step up and mentor and coach the same that you would a man. Because we don't come into a job with those skills just, I'm like the best firefighter ever here on my first day. No, it takes years to hone those skills and become good at it. But to have that mindset that if somebody can't accomplish it because, they don't have male genitalia, that's the reason, because they didn't come equipped with the proper stuff. That's bullshit. And I've even heard women that are, not in the fire service. That's one of the things that I struggle with, is when I hear other women say, well, women don't need to be doing that job anyway. Well, why not? I've worked with some incredible women.
Don't we want to have somebody in the role that's best equipped for it? Like, what are we doing here?
Well, So here's the thing, when we talk about any organization, the diversity of thought and action and experience brings so much value to the table. And when you have like a feminine and masculine, I mean, we all have that energy, but to have both of those energies working together to develop the best leadership model possible, like I feel like you've got to have that, because if all you have is that masculine energy, or all you have is that feminine energy, there it's lacking. You've got to have both. I truly believe that you have to have both, and there's so much for men to learn from women, and so much for women to learn from men
Beautiful.
when it comes to leadership.
Beautiful.
And
I don't think there's any room in leadership whatsoever for one dominant sex to show themselves so undeveloped that when they get poked, like maybe someone can do this better than you, that they wouldn't be grateful that that was revealed. Like, why would I not want the best person to lead here? Like, how would that be a problem? And so I think leadership across the board, you know, if it's you and I in a position and a woman comes along and she can do better, I mean, that doesn't matter for me. Like, let's step aside. Talk to us and the listeners for a second. We're coming to the end of our show. The relationship with your daughter, what did it transition to when you were in the heat of battle? Like, you're going through termination, you're going through the dark night of the soul. Your dad kind of disowned you for a bit. You don't need to go into that at all. Um, but what was it like for your daughter then? And what is it like today?
I think it was very confusing for her when I was going through all of that. Uh, and again, I alluded to it earlier. I was struggling with PTSD. I still, you know, I've got work to do. I think it's an ongoing process of healing. But I was in a really bad place. Um, and then to lose my job just added to that.
Mm-hmm.
I felt like I had let everybody down. Um,
Mm-hmm.
you know, at no point could I look at my accomplishments and see value in it, because it was for nothing. Here I am, you know, like just burnt to ashes. I've got nothing left. Who am I? I don't even know who I am. And I've embarrassed my family. I've tarnished my family name. My daughter is now looking at me like, who is this scumbag? She wasn't. But in my mind, how could she view me in any positive way when I've just been smeared all over the media?
Well,
And
what
the
do you think?
real
Go ahead. Sorry.
the reality is that she was looking at me, and I want to say that she probably was going, I don't know how he's going to make it through this, but he's my dad, and he's going to do it. And thank God I did. I mean, and it was because because I don't know if I shared this with you, but there was a night, like I had went to a really dark place after losing my job. I have my daughter every other week. On one of the weeks that I didn't have her, I was drinking myself into oblivion, and I had made a decision to go to a bar after already being drunk. Drove myself to a bar, drank and drank and drank until that bar closed, and then decided to drive myself home. And I decided that I was just going to end things. And I said, just going to drive my truck into a wall. It'll look like an accident. My blood alcohol level is through the roof. Nobody's going to believe that I did it to myself. So I rolled my windows down, unbuckled my seatbelt, and stepped on the accelerator and aimed my truck for this brick wall. I figured it, and I picked it specifically. And it's amazing to me that I had the clarity of thought to, to, I knew that if I glanced off it, there was a huge tree that I was going to hit. So, I was good either way. And as I'm hurling myself towards this wall, I take my hands off the wheel and look up. I feel like I was asking for forgiveness. I'm not really a spiritual kind of person, but I was looking up to ask for forgiveness. And on my visor is a picture of me holding my daughter on the day she was born. And
Wow. Wow.
it was in that instant that I slammed on the brakes and everything went black. I have no recollection from the moment that things went black to waking up the next day in my bed, truck in my driveway, no idea. I mean, clearly I drove myself there, but that's how.
Wow.
And I just broke
Wow.
because she's everything to me,
Wow.
and I could not.
Mm.
I could not do that to her. I mean, like, what trauma would I have caused in her? So I mean, I just committed to fixing myself, and I did the work, as painful as it was. And through all of it, there was times where I really didn't want to have conversations with her, but I did. And I wanted to be open and honest with her. I wanted her to understand and know that, you're going to make mistakes. It's not those mistakes that define you unless you let it. It's what you do with that experience that defines who you are. It's your choice. And uh, along the way, and this is one of the things that I've shared with her, is that we all need to give ourselves some grace sometimes.
Mm-hmm.
Because it was really easy for me to be like a tyrant to myself.
We
And
seem we seem to have so many demands of ourselves. However, the language that came before we could speak was empathy. Empathy is the universal language. Sir Francis of Assisi says, if words are necessary, use them. Communication happens through empathy. Grace. I love it. Grace along your whole entire journey. Not that it just turned out the way you wanted. That's not grace. Grace isn't like a vending machine God. Grace is unmerited favor. It comes whether you like it or not. You can't make more, can't make less. You can stop it, perhaps. Don't let it flow through you. But if you, like you say, if you allow grace, we all need it sometimes. I wonder if not most times. When I think about grace, there you are hurtling yourself towards a wall. You look up. Intuition, we don't know. Grace, probably. And you see your daughter, you're holding your daughter, and all you can hear is, he's my dad and he's going to do it. So Father's Day is here. Father's Day is here. Father, because you brought life into the world. You helped create it anyway. She brought it into the world. You brought a certain thing into the world, your semen perhaps. Together you created this life. So here's the thing. Ask yourself the question. Am I doing it? Your children think you're going to do it. And perhaps the more connected piece is go beyond my daddy's going to do it thought. My daddy's going to be it. Being it. Yes, the man likes doing, but the man likes to also be it. When that happens, the man doesn't just build a relationship with what he does on the external and what he creates and brings, manages, fixes, and control. Those are all needed pieces, sure. But the man wants to relax. Why does the man want to enter a woman? Why? Because the man really appreciates who she is. How can she take all of this chaos of life and just make not even sense of it, but kind of shift it around and not feel like it has to be compartmentalized? Just live there. So the man craves to be. So dads, we can be while we're in the bedroom only if we like, but that's silly. Why wouldn't we take what our wives have given, our partners have given us, or the feminine, the divine feminine? There's divine masculine in us. Why don't we instead own who we are, and that we have both masculine and feminine in us? And guess what? We get to be a little more gracious and empathetic with ourselves. Because guess what, gentlemen? Women, whoever is listening to the show, life is typically a hodgepodge of wins and losses. That's how we perceive things anyway. And guess what? Typically, we say we don't want the loss because that's the bad news, right? That's the negative news. When in reality, it's just news. One isn't good, one isn't bad. It's like the coin, both sides coexisting. It's true. Slap that coin down on the counter again and say, listen, I'm only the bad news, and ask yourself, what kind of hope and a prayer do you have to continue in life in a healthy way? Not. When you look at it and realize I am fully human, it's Father's Day. Own your fully humanness and rejoice in the fact that you get to participate with what society says is the most difficult thing to do. Society apparently says we want to do it, but we're stumbling. I don't think society doesn't want to move forward. It's just we fear that maybe if we finally embrace and say the I'm sorries and just open our hearts and reveal that this is the work we actually are about and could be about, I think when we do that is when we give ourselves the dopamine hit that we're actually craving. Which man doesn't want that? Which man doesn't want that? Think about it. In the bedroom, men, typically, a lot of men anyway, they crave not just intimacy, but they crave release. Listen, you want to give yourself the ultimate release? Step up. Step up outside the bedroom. Do it a little bit like, and you are a shining example here. When I say shining, I love it. Full human, like David. You know, there's David, there's Goliath, maybe. I don't know. I just came up with this, right? So there you go. David, talk to us. Where can people find you? So your book, Fireproof, Embers to Excellence, where can people find you, your work, to engage with you? Share, please.
Hollenbachleadership.com. That's my website. The podcast is there. You're going to be on shortly. The book is available on my website. The official release is October 11th. That's when it'll be available on Amazon, Barnes & Noble, and your bookstores, all of that. But right now, if you order on my website, I will sign your copy and send it your way.
Lovely. So there you go, folks. And if I get this wrong, please correct me, and I'll put it in the show notes. But to make it easy for some that are listening, you want to write this down: www.hollenbach, HOLLENBACH.com.
Hollenbach Leadership.
Leadership. Don't forget the leadership there. I like that. It's so good. That's wonderful. Any final words of wisdom you want to leave with the people here? Anything that comes to the surface?
The biggest thing I think that I would like to reiterate is that we need to give ourselves some grace sometimes. You know, a lot of times we put a lot of pressure on ourselves to be perfect when that's impossible, or we beat ourselves up for mistakes that we've made. You know, the lesson is in the experience. Be better for it.
It's Father's Day. Have a great experience. David, it was wonderful having you on. We shall be talking soon. You take care.
Thank you.
My sincere hope is that you've gleaned a few nuggets for yourself and a few pieces of interest that help you move forward in your unique journey. So again, I thank you for joining me here. This is James Hepner clocking out. Until next time, peace out, rock up.